Hi everyone, this is Scott Weidenkivowitz. Today I'm sharing another photo critique, and this one is a gorgeous, beach shot that looks like it could be sunset, and it's like the sun is just blaring, and it's beautiful. I mean, the photographer who shot this was very fortunate to be able to get this scene, to be able to enjoy this scene in the first place. So this is the photograph that the photographer captured and processed, and I just want to share some minor things that I would have done a little bit differently, but overall I think the photograph is beautiful. And I mean, look at the reflections in the water. You can see the moss and whatnot growing all over the place. It's very cool right here with the buildings. And what I would have done a little bit differently, for one, I probably would have done this as an HDR because I could have got a lot more detail here. I could have got a lot more detail here. I could have not gotten a silhouette of the pier and just gotten it full detail and then processed it how I wanted to from there. But this is only one frame, so because this is only one frame, you're kind of limited to what it is. So you can only process it so much. So here is the original photograph. So as you can see, already the photographer brought out some color and brought out the detail in the buildings in the background. But the photographer also tried to bring out details here. And what I'm going to show you is something I would have done a little bit different. And let's dig into what I would do. So here's the original. The first thing I'm going to do, just for sake of making things easier, is I'm going to rotate this to make it straight because it drives me nuts that it's crooked. So the photographer did that as well. So I'm not going to fault the photographer for that. But I'm going to start here at the top. And the first thing I want to do is I actually want to cool this down just a little, not too much. And I'm actually going to start with the graduated filter. I usually put it in and I over exaggerate just to make sure that I have it in the right spot. And I'm going to bring that back up, zero out the exposure. Now what I want to do is I actually want to bring up the shadows to bring out that building. And I want to bring down the highlights to bring the sky a little bit more in detail. And I'm going to bump up the clarity to bring that out a little bit, and the contrast. Not too much. Now as you can see, it's already starting to look like the photographer's, but then what I'm going to do is some adjustments to go a little bit further. So we're going to get that graduated filter so that it's all the way there. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close that. And I'm actually going to adjust my whites and blacks, make sure that I got some clipping going on, but not too much. And if we let go, we're still good. And we do this to see some clipping there. And we're still good. Now the bridge, I actually don't care if it's out because I'm not too concerned. And I'm actually not too concerned about this because wait to see what I'm going to do with that. So that is good. I'm going to bring down the highlights a little bit more, bring up the contrast a little bit more. I didn't get those highlights. Now, as you can see, it's already starting to pop here. That orange is starting to pop. And that is perfectly fine because that is what we want. But I actually want it to be cooler than what the photographer did because look at that. As I cooled it down, I'm starting to see the blues in the sky. So here's the photographer's and here's what I've done so far. And here's just a before and after from the original. It already has a little bit more pop. Now, what I want to do is I want to bring out this more than the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another graduated filter. And I'm going to drag that down just to make sure. So as you can see, I did the wrong way. I have to rotate. And bring that up just a bit. Actually, I'm going to go right about there. Zero out the exposure, and then I'm going to bump the clarity down, just about 55 down, and I'm going to reduce the sharpening as well. And what that's doing is actually blurring. I'm getting more of like a tilt shift type effect on the bottom. So you can see here's the before and after. So I'm actually blurring that bottom out even more. Now the next thing I would do is I would go down to tone curve and bump that up to medium contrast. And as you can see, I just lost a little bit more in the houses, in the buildings. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit more, bring up the exposure just a hair. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I'm going to close that out, and I'm going to go down to lens correction, because here is where I would actually add the lens correction to make sure that all the distortion is okay. Now, I don't need to do any spot healing. If I wanted to, I could remove some of these from down here and make this just more bare, but I'm actually, you know, I like it. I'm not a big fan of this big one here, but I'm okay with the rest, so I'm not going to touch any of those. Now then I'll go to Hue, Saturation, Luminance and see if I want to do anything with this. And to do so, I'm actually going to use this dropper, click and just drag down a little bit, see if I can bring some of the colors down. And then I'm going to try to see if I can bring up the luminance of the blue in the back. It's very cool. And the saturation, I might even bring down the saturation just a little bit. You can see the orange is very bright, and it's okay, but it's, you know, a little bit too much for my taste. Now, the original, the photographer processed was very saturated. I'm not a fan of saturation. I like vibrance more, and I like to just subtly add the colors to pop a little bit instead of just being overall. So that's exactly what I'm doing, just being very subtle. I'm going to go back to Luminance and see if I can do any other brightening and darkening of some of the colors. We can even go to hue and adjust the hue saturation, the hue of the colors as well, to sort of, you know, mess with those, make those more suited to what we want. So you can see it's warm and cool at the same time. So this is probably what I would do right here for the final. So here is a before and an after. And you can see that it's just very dramatic. And it's not too much, but it's not too little. And here's what the photographer did. And you can see the photographer even went through and did some sharpening here too. So I could go through and do that. I probably wouldn't do that in Lightroom. I'm not a big fan of Lightroom sharpening. So I'd probably bring this into Nik Define, to Nik Sharpener to sharpen that, or maybe a Topaz Sharpener to do that as well, and not do it in Lightroom. But for now, I'm just going to stick with this. And to give you an idea of some other things that you could do, so here is another one that I did, very subtle. I added a little vignette. So this is two different versions of it. So if I wanted to, I could add a vignette. Now here's this is a preset pack that I have called Developer Fixer Bath. And here's one vignette option, here's another vignette option, here's another vignette option. So I've got a bunch. And then another thing that you could do is make it black and white. So here's another preset for another processing version that I did, where it's just a minimal black and white. Now here I would most likely get rid of the stuff on the bottom here using the spot healing tool. I'd probably go in and just remove those, because they are a little distracting when it's black and white, but when it's color, it's not. So I might do this in Lightroom. I might not, because as you can see, Lightroom's not perfect with spot healing. Photoshop is a lot better at that, but you get the idea. I would probably remove that, because without it, you bring a lot more of the focus and attention. You're not really worried about the color, so you bring a lot more of everything to the pier in the background and the buildings, rather than all the, you know, stuff that's in the foreground. So that's probably what I would do. Even just cloning, really, just cloning the two in the background was a lot better than that gigantic one. As you can see, that it needs a lot of attention. So again, I would probably not do this part in Lightroom. I'd probably do it in Photoshop. But black and white works very well for this photograph as well. So lots of options to choose from. But again, here is a comparison between the two. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Here's a comparison between the two. Let's close that, go full screen. Here we go. So this is a comparison between the original of what the photographer did and what I did. As you can see, one's a little bit more saturated than the other. However, I didn't do any sharpening to it, so I would want to do that outside of Lightroom to sharpen those buildings even more. But there you go. That's what I would do. Again, the photographer did nothing wrong. This is just a matter of opinion. This is what I would do if this was my photograph. I probably, as I said in the beginning, I probably would have done an HDR. I probably would have bracketed this and done an HDR so I had more dynamic range to work with of this scene. But thanks for watching.